Across the planet, there are places so striking, so impossibly dramatic, they seem to belong to another world entirely. Towering peaks that vanish into cloud banks, ancient volcanoes that smolder beneath star-filled skies, jagged ridges sculpted by wind and time. These are landscapes that defy logic and ignite the imagination. From the glowing craters of Mount Etna in Sicily to the surreal spires of Zhangjiajie in China, from the snow-draped ridges of the Remarkables in New Zealand to the haunting double summits of Ushba in Georgia, each place is a testament to nature's wildest expressions. In this journey, we explore Earth's most unreal mountains, natural wonders that stand as monuments to the raw power and endless mystery of our planet. But before we continue, subscribe to the channel and like the video. High above the world's chaos and crowds, where clouds gather like ghostly rivers and winds carve stories into rock, Mount Everest rises with a majesty that has awed humanity for centuries. Known in Nepal as Sagarmatha and in Tibet as Chomolungma, this colossal peak is not merely the tallest mountain on Earth, it is a monument to both nature's raw force and humankind's endless drive to ascend, to explore, to conquer what was once thought unconquerable. Towering at 8,848.86 meters, 29,031.7 feet, above sea level, Everest pierces the heavens in the Himalayas along the Nepal-Tibet border, forming part of the Mahalanga Himal subrange. Its summit is literally in the jet stream, battered by winds exceeding 160 km per hour, 100 miles per hour, and the air is so thin that humans can only survive a few minutes without supplemental oxygen. Everest's formation began tens of millions of years ago when the Indian tectonic plate crashed into the Eurasian plate, forcing up the crust in a geological ballet that continues today. It grows by a few millimeters each year, a slow but unstoppable heave of Earth's inner power. Its face is a jagged symphony of rock, snow, and ice, adorned with iconic features like the Hillary Step, the Khumbu Icefall, and the South Kernel. The Khumbu Icefall, in particular, is a constantly shifting maze of towering seracs and deadly crevasses, where climbers move with the pace of reverence, fully aware that one wrong step can be fatal. To most people, Everest exists more in myth than reality. For the Sherpa people who live in the nearby Solo-Khumbu region, however, it is sacred, a divine mother. The mountain's spiritual weight is so profound that many Sherpas offer rituals and blessings before any attempt to summit. Everest has seen thousands of ascents, but it has also claimed hundreds of lives. Its death zone, above 8,000 meters, is a realm where the human body deteriorates rapidly. Frostbite, cerebral edema, exhaustion, and altitude sickness are constant threats. Frozen corpses litter the route, some serving as grim markers for climbers who follow. Despite these perils, Everest continues to draw adventurers from every corner of the globe. The first successful ascent by Sir Edmund Hillary of New Zealand and Tenzing Norgay, a Sherpa of Nepal, on May 29, 1953, was a defining moment in human exploration. Since then, technological advancements in gear and weather forecasting have made the climb more accessible, but not less dangerous. Commercial expeditions have increased dramatically, often leading to overcrowded traffic jams near the summit. Images of climbers queued on narrow ledges like pilgrims at the gates of the gods have sparked global conversations about the ethics of high-altitude tourism. Yet, standing atop Everest, even momentarily, is said to change a person forever. From the summit, Earth curves below, distant and delicate, with winds that howl like ancient spirits. It is a place where the sky seems closer than the ground and where time itself feels frozen. And when climbers descend, they carry with them not just photos or broken fingernails or frostbitten toes, but the imprint of a moment so unreal that language can scarcely hold it. Westward from the towering solitude of Everest, the story of the Earth's unreal places continues in the heart of Europe, where the Bernese Alps cradle a mountain of cold, calculated beauty and deadly allure, the Eiger. Its name alone carries weight. It does not need the altitude of Everest to inspire awe, for the Eiger demands respect through its sheer verticality and brutal history. Rising 3,967 meters, 13,015 feet, above sea level, this peak in Switzerland may not be the tallest in the Alps, but it holds a reputation that has terrified and enticed climbers for over a century. What makes the Eiger so infamous is not just its height, but its northern face, a 1,800-meter wall of ice and rock known simply as the Nordwand, or the North Face. Locals call it the Mordwand, meaning murder wall, a grim pun that echoes the tragedies that have played out on its sheer flanks. The North Face is permanently shadowed, cursed with brittle rock, falling ice, and sudden storms that roll in like dark thoughts. For decades, it remained unconquered, taunting the bravest of alpinists. The first successful ascent in 1938, achieved by a German-Austrian team, took 3 grueling days, and even today, climbing it remains one of the most dangerous undertakings in the world of mountaineering. From the village of Grindeld below, the Eiger looms with an angular, brooding presence. Its snowy crown sits atop a tower of shale and limestone, pierced with gullies and riddled with roots that only the most skilled climbers dare attempt. The air here is crisp, the soundscape quiet but for the occasional roar of an avalanche or the deep echo of a rockfall. It's a mountain that seems almost aware of its legend, stoic, unyielding, and merciless. Modern climbers, equipped with GPS, weather reports, and high-performance gear, still find themselves at the mercy of the Eiger's mood. It changes without warning. Clouds drift in with deceptive silence. Winds can whip ropes against the rock with the force of a lash, and ice that was solid in the morning can become treacherous by afternoon. Numerous climbers have disappeared here, some never found, entombed in the face's dark crevices. Their stories are whispered among guides and climbers, forming a ghostly oral history of loss and bravery. Yet for all its dangers, the Eiger also radiates a magnetic beauty. As the sun rises behind the peaks, its north face glows briefly in hues of peach and lavender before settling into shadow for the rest of the day. In winter, ice curtains glisten like crystal veils, and in summer, patches of green bloom defiantly on lower ridges. Cable cars and cogwheel trains now allow tourists to ascend to the Jungfraujoch, the top of Europe, to catch a glimpse of the giant up close without risking the wrath of its slopes. But those who climb it do not do so for the view, they do it for the story, for the test, for the rare communion with something beyond comfort, beyond comprehension. It is a mountain that embodies the edge between glory and oblivion. And perhaps that's why it continues to call, because in its shadow, humanity remembers its limits, and in its face, sees the mirror of its own ambition, fear, and resilience. Far across the Atlantic, the narrative of otherworldly mountains shifts to the Pacific Northwest of the United States, where a different kind of majesty rises, lush, fertile, volcanic. Mount Rainier, the tallest mountain in the state of Washington, emerges not from stark desert or rugged highlands, but from the embrace of ancient forests, roaring rivers, and fields so alive with wildflowers in summer they seem to ripple like painted cloth beneath a towering white crown. At 14,411 feet, 4,392 meters, Mount Rainier is not just the most prominent peak in the Cascades, but one of the most visually arresting stratovolcanoes on Earth. A glacier-covered titan, it looms above the surrounding lowlands like a dream, or a warning. Its sheer mass dominates the skyline for hundreds of miles. On clear days, it appears to float above the Earth, its glacial flanks gleaming in the sun. On cloudy days, it vanishes entirely, only to emerge again at sunset in pinks and violets, suspended above the mist like a vision. But this mountain is not merely a pretty spectacle. It is a living, breathing force of nature, classified as an active volcano, and potentially one of the most dangerous in North America. Under its frozen surface stirs molten threat, biding time beneath the largest single-peak glacial system in the contiguous United States. Mount Rainier has a personality, one shaped by the tremendous contrasts it embodies. The lower slopes are a riot of life, especially in summer when alpine meadows burst into an impossible array of colors. Lupins, avalanche lilies, paintbrushes, and bare grass bloom in carpets, waving beneath the peaks like offerings. The air here is thick with pine and the sound of water, melted snow rushing down in the form of creeks and waterfalls, carving through volcanic rock with the slow patience of centuries. Above these meadows, the terrain becomes steeper, the air colder, and the ground crunches underfoot with ancient snow. Over 24 glaciers descend from the summit, feeding the mountain's rivers and shaping its deep, dramatic valleys. The Emmons Glacier on the east side is the largest glacier in the contiguous United States, and the Carbon Glacier on the north boasts the lowest terminus elevation of any glacier in the lower 48, reaching down into thick forest like a frozen finger of time. To Native American tribes such as the Puyallup and the Nisqually, Rainier, known in Lushootseed as Tahoma or Tacoma, meaning Mother of Waters, is sacred. It is not just a peak, but a living presence, the giver of rivers and sustainer of lands. That cultural reverence still hums through the forests and valleys today, even as visitors from across the globe ascend its trails or study its geologic rhythms in laboratories. Climbing Mount Rainier is a feat that demands not just stamina but mountaineering skill. Its elevation might be dwarfed by the Himalayas or Andes, but its glacier and rapidly shifting weather make it one of the most challenging climbs in the United States. Sudden whiteouts, avalanches, and crevasse falls are constant threats, and even the most experienced climbers have met their end here. It is a mountain that must be treated not as a backdrop, but as a protagonist, one that can shift moods in moments. Yet millions come not to conquer it, but simply to witness it. Mount Rainier National Park, established in 1899, was the fifth national park in the United States and remains one of the most visited. Its network of trails weaves through old-growth forests, along ridges with panoramic views, and into serene valleys where elk graze beneath glacier-fed streams. The Paradise area on the southern slope is aptly named. At the height of wildflower bloom, it truly does feel like stepping into another realm. Elsewhere, Sunrise, the highest point accessible by vehicle, offers commanding vistas of the Cascades, where Rainier appears less like a mountain and more like the resting place of giants. But the beauty of Rainier belies the potential danger that simmers beneath its surface. It last erupted around 1,000 years ago, and geologists warn that its next eruption is not a matter of if, but when. A major eruption or even a massive glacial collapse could trigger lahars, volcanic mudflows, that would thunder down its valleys and reach nearby towns in under an hour. Entire communities sit within the Laha hazard zones, and the mountain is closely monitored for seismic activity, gas emissions, and thermal changes. Despite this latent risk, it continues to inspire awe and reverence rather than fear. It is not just a geological marvel, it's a barometer for environmental change. Its glacier are retreating at an alarming rate due to climate change, altering river flows and ecosystems dependent on glacial melt. Scientists closely study Rainier's ice for clues about past climate patterns and warnings about the future. The snowpack feeds the Columbia River Basin, a lifeline for the Pacific Northwest, and even minor changes in Rainier's glacier ripple outward in ecological consequence. Yet, standing in its shadow, one doesn't think of lahars or melting ice. One simply looks up, and what they see is something ungraspable, a vision of what the Earth looked like before cities, before nations, before memory. In spring, marmots chirp and eagles soar over waterfalls. In winter, the slopes are wrapped in silence and snowfall, a monastic stillness so deep it swallows all sound but the crunch of your own boots. Every season here offers a different version of the unreal, sometimes riotous with color, sometimes skeletal and white, but always alive, always watching. From native legend to volcanic dread, from flowered meadows to shifting glacier, Mount Rainier is not simply a mountain. It is a story being told in stone and snow and silence. And those who visit, even if just once, carry a part of that story with them forever. Where Mount Rainier speaks in the language of glacier and green valleys, Mount Etna roars in tongues of fire. Perched on the eastern edge of Sicily, overlooking the Ionian Sea and shadowing the ancient cities of Catania and Taormina, Etna is not merely Europe's most active volcano, it is one of the most continuously erupting and studied volcanic bodies on the planet. Rising to a height of roughly 3,329 meters, 10,922 feet. Though this number fluctuates with each eruption, Etna is a sprawling, complex, and ever-changing titan. It is not a solitary peak, but a volcanic system alive with rumbles and tremors, fumaroles, and lava fountains, where smoke often hangs in the sky like a warning written in ash. Etna's eruptions are as old as mythology. To the ancient Greeks, this mountain was sacred and feared. It was said to be the forge of Hephaestus, the god of fire and blacksmithing, where Cyclopes hammered thunderbolts for Zeus. Beneath its surface, legends claimed the monstrous Typhon was imprisoned by the gods, his thrashings causing earthquakes and eruptions. But mythology was not far from reality. The ground here does indeed shudder. The air often carries a faint scent of sulfur, and at night, from miles away, the summit may glow red like a burning eye staring from the clouds. Unlike the towering, conical silhouette of Rainier or the angular menace of the Eiger, Etna is vast, almost sprawling, its flanks sweeping in long arcs across the landscape, streaked with ancient lava flows turned black and brittle, dotted with craters that mark previous explosions. It does not sleep for long. Its eruptions are frequent, sometimes weeks or months apart, and they range from gentle effusive outflows to powerful strombolian blasts that hurl incandescent rocks skyward. In winter, it's possible to ski on its snow-covered slopes while a plume of smoke trails overhead. In summer, the dusty trails lead hikers into eerie, moonlight terrain, fields of cooled lava, twisted rock formations, and smoking vents where the earth sighs out its heat. Etna is a UNESCO World Heritage Site not just for its natural power but for its cultural impact. For over 2 millennia, it has been central to Sicilian identity. Generations have lived and died in its shadow, building towns from its rock, planting vineyards in its volcanic soil, and praying during its most violent episodes. The people here have learned to coexist with their mountain, not to tame it, for that is impossible, but to live in respectful tension with it. The city of Catania, just 30 kilometers south of the summit, has been destroyed and rebuilt several times due to eruptions and earthquakes. Yet it thrives, a testament to human resilience in the face of nature's wrath. Etna's eruptions often begin with tremors, small at first, then growing, like a heartbeat accelerating. Smoke thickens, vents glow, and lava begins to spill, snaking down the flanks in rivers of molten rock. Some eruptions send ash high into the stratosphere, disrupting air traffic and turning day to dusk in surrounding towns. Others light up the night sky with fire fountains, lava arcs that rise dozens of meters before splashing back to Earth in incandescent waves. In quieter times, the summit craters whisper with steam, and hikers with permits can walk along the outer rims, peering into the breathing vents of a mountain that never fully sleeps. One of Etna's most extraordinary features is its duality, at once destructive and fertile. Its lava flows burn and bury, yes, but they also enrich. The volcanic soil around the mountain is among the most productive in Italy, giving life to citrus orchards, chestnut groves, olive trees, and vineyards that produce rich, mineral-heavy wines. The contrast is surreal, lush green fields and cultivated terraces climbing up toward blackened, lifeless ridges. A few kilometers can separate vibrant villages from smoldering craters. It's a place where fire and life are inseparable. Etna is monitored constantly by volcanologists, drones, seismic instruments, satellite imaging, and thermal cameras. The mountain's moods are studied like those of a temperamental god. Yet, despite all the data, Etna remains unpredictable. In 1669, a massive eruption buried several villages and reached the walls of Catania. In 1992, another powerful event threatened the town of Zaffarana Etnea. Emergency crews dug diversion channels and built barriers of earth and concrete to redirect lava, an effort that showed how modern engineering could at least delay the mountain's will. More recent eruptions, like those in 2021, remind locals that no technology can stop the flow when Etna truly decides to speak. Standing near the summit, where the earth is warm beneath your feet and every breath tastes faintly of sulfur, the mountain feels alive in ways few places on Earth do. The rocks pulse with hidden heat. The air carries a tension, a sense that this place exists outside the ordinary scale of time. Etna has erupted over 200 times since the first recorded instance in 425 BC, and it will erupt again and again, long after cities have risen and fallen, long after names are forgotten. This sense of continuity, of timelessness, gives Etna its eerie, unreal quality. It doesn't just belong to Italy or to the Mediterranean. It belongs to the deep earth, to fire itself. And yet, its surreal beauty cannot be overstated. On cold nights, when the sky is clear and the moon low, you can see the lava glimmering like a red thread winding through black stone. The sight of smoke unfurling against a star-filled sky, of glowing craters pulsing orange atop dark ridges, is unlike anything else on the planet. It is at once terrifying and seductive. Etna does not ask to be admired or feared. It simply exists, ancient, active, and utterly beyond control. Off the northwestern coast of Africa, where the Atlantic Ocean shimmers with turquoise currents and trade winds whisper across subtropical isles, rises a peak so surreal it seems lifted from another world altogether. Pico del Teide, on the island of Tenerife in Spain's Canary Islands, does not merely dominate its landscape, it defines it. Towering at 3,715 meters, 12,188 feet, it is the highest point in Spain and the third highest volcanic structure on Earth when measured from its base on the ocean floor. But statistics alone fail to convey the haunting beauty of Teide. This mountain, swathed in clouds and crowned with fire-forged rock, exists on the very edge of terrestrial experience, so alien in appearance that astronauts have trained on its slopes to prepare for missions to Mars. To stand within the Teide National Park, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, is to feel as if you've stepped into a science fiction narrative. The terrain here is otherworldly. Raw lava fields stretch across the caldera in twisted ribbons, black and ochre rock formations jut from the earth like frozen explosions, and mineral deposits paint the slopes with unexpected hues: sulfuric yellow, copper green, rusted iron red. During the day, sunlight exaggerates every contour, casting sharp shadows that make the landscape appear sculpted, deliberate. By night, with little light pollution, the heavens unfold in staggering clarity. The sky above Teide is considered one of the clearest and cleanest in Europe, attracting astronomers from around the globe. The Observatorio del Teide, perched on the mountain's shoulder, is one of the most important space monitoring facilities in the Northern Hemisphere. Yet Teide is more than an astronomical vantage point or a geological curiosity. It is alive with myth and meaning. To the indigenous Guanche people, who inhabited Tenerife long before Spanish conquest, the mountain was sacred. They believed it was the prison of the demon Guayota, who kidnapped the sun and plunged the world into darkness until the god Achaman defeated him and sealed him within Teide. The mountain, then, was not just a peak, it was a place of cosmic consequence, a liminal zone between gods and mortals. In the modern era, Teide continues to carry a quiet spiritual weight. Its summit lies above the clouds, often literally. On many days, Tenerife's lower elevations are shrouded in sea mist or cloud banks, while the upper slopes bask in sunlight and piercing blue skies. The moment one ascends past the cloud layer, either by hiking or via the cable car that ascends to just below the summit, the view opens like a secret revealed. Islands in the distance poke through the clouds like floating fortresses, and the curved horizon reminds you that you are truly high above the Earth's usual rhythms. It's a disorienting, magical perspective, hovering between sea and stars, sky and stone. Teide itself is a stratovolcano, the result of complex tectonic and volcanic processes stretching back millions of years. The current peak rose from the ashes of a much older volcanic structure, Las Canada's volcano, which collapsed in a massive eruption around 170,000 years ago, forming a vast caldera. Teide grew from within this collapsed bowl, a phoenix from the geological grave. Today, the Las Canada's caldera, about 16 kilometers wide, creates a natural amphitheater of rock and silence around the summit, adding to the surreal scale of the mountain. Though it last erupted in 1909, Teide is not dormant. It is classified as an active volcano, and the region experiences regular seismic activity and the emission of volcanic gases. Fumaroles near the summit release sulfur-rich vapors that curl into the thin, high-altitude air. Visitors who ascend to the crater, whether by foot or by cable car followed by a short permit-only hike, can feel the Earth's breath rising from the depths. The air near the summit is thin and often tinged with a faint chemical sharpness, a reminder that the mountain is not merely ancient, it is alive. But if Teide's geology impresses and its mythos enchants, it is its atmosphere that overwhelms. The silence here is profound. In the caldera, surrounded by craggy lava fields and twisted pines, sound falls away. There are places where the wind doesn't reach and time feels suspended. The rock beneath your feet is porous, sharp, unforgiving. Strange formations like the Roques de Garcia, towers of stone balanced improbably on narrow bases, puncture the flatness like monuments to forgotten gods. In spring, delicate taginaceae flowers bloom in bursts of red from the cracks of rock, defying the harshness of their environment, a biological miracle in a landscape that often looks dead. And still, people come, from all over the world. Some seek adventure, hiking the steep trails that rise from the base of the caldera to the summit, a grueling trek that reveals a new world with every elevation gain. Others come for the stars, setting up telescopes or cameras to capture constellations, meteor showers, and the great swathe of the Milky Way. Many come for the quietude, the clarity, the rare experience of being removed from everything human. Teide offers that, a space to reflect, to marvel, to reset. Climbing the final stretch to the summit, available only with a special permit due to the protected status of the area, is like walking on another planet. The ground becomes brittle and sulfur-streaked. The temperature drops. Clouds swirl far below, giving the impression of floating. The horizon is curved, and at dawn, the mountain casts the longest shadow in the world across the Atlantic, a perfect triangular pyramid of shade stretching endlessly westward, an ephemeral monument only visible from this unreal vantage point. From its prime val origins to its cosmic observatories, from its mythic past to its seismic future, Teide is not just a mountain, it is a paradox. It is the product of immense violence and enduring beauty. It is lunar in form yet deeply rooted in Earth's own story. It challenges definitions of wilderness, of silence, of what it means to be truly above the world. To stand on Teide is not to see the Earth, but to see beyond it. In the icy breath of its summit winds, in the brittle edges of its volcanic crust, in the deep quiet that stretches out across the caldera, you feel it, the sheer, wild poetry of a planet still shaping itself, still dreaming in stone. In the shadowed, mystical heart of East Java, where the land folds into itself and steam rises from the earth like whispers from another world, Mount Bromo smolders in silent defiance. Unlike the towering, icy grandeur of Teide or the monumental violence of Etna, Bromo is an illusionist, never overly tall, never aggressive in form, yet utterly transfixing in its ability to appear like something torn from the pages of dream. Standing only 2,329 meters, 7,641 feet tall, it is far from Indonesia's highest peak, yet it might be its most iconic. This is not a mountain you measure in meters. This is a place you measure in emotion, in awe, in wonder, in stillness. Mount Bromo belongs to the Tengah caldera, an ancient supervolcano whose violent collapse formed a highland plateau nearly 10 kilometers across. Within this grand amphitheater of ash and stone, a new generation of volcanoes was born, rising like monuments in the basin of their ancestor. Bromo is one of these, and arguably its most active. Alongside its siblings, such as Mount Batuk, it creates a surreal visual harmony. Batuk, perfectly symmetrical and striped with green ridges, stands dormant and regal. Bromo, jagged, low, and smoking, seems raw and unfinished, like a wound the earth refuses to let heal. The landscape around Bromo is unlike anything else on the planet. Known as the Sea of Sand, Segra Wedi, a vast expanse of fine, grey volcanic ash sprawls in all directions, broken only by skeletal trees, scattered temples, and the occasional footprint. When the wind rises, the sand lifts in swirling curtains, obscuring the world and making time feel irrelevant. On a misty morning, when fog pools in the caldera and the first light bleeds across the rim, Bromo appears to float, unanchored from reality. It is the kind of vision that silences even the most talkative traveler. Getting to Bromo is a pilgrimage in itself. Many visitors stay in the nearby mountain village of Simoro Lorang, a place so high and chilly that it seems impossible it belongs in tropical Indonesia. From there, they rise before dawn, ascending to vantage points like Mount Penanjakan, where a great reveal unfolds each morning, a procession of light, cloud, and color sweeping across the landscape as Bromo begins to emerge from the shadows. The crater constantly exhales, white smoke rising in lazy columns that catch the morning sun and turn gold. Behind it, Mount Semeru, the tallest peak on Java, occasionally releases its own plume, reminding all who watch that this is a land formed by fire and still ruled by it. Approaching Bromo's crater is like crossing a desolate moonscape. Tourists and pilgrims alike traverse the sea of sand by jeep, horse, or on foot. There is a haunting quiet to this journey, punctuated only by the crunch of ash underfoot or the distant, rhythmic thud of hooves. At the base of the volcano, a steep staircase ascends to the rim. The climb, though short, is labored due to the altitude and fine dust. At the top, the view is intimate and fearsome. Bromo's crater opens like a mouth, its interior alive with gas and heat, its sides steep and ashen. The sulfuric breath of the earth pours upward, thick and acrid, forcing many to cover their faces. Peering inside feels like gazing into the abyss, not metaphorically, but literally. It is an open window into the planet's living interior. But Bromo is not merely a geological marvel. It is a sacred site. The Tenggerese people, descendants of the Majapahit kingdom, consider the mountain holy. Every year, they celebrate the Yardnya Kasada festival, a spiritual event like no other. Under moonlight and torches, villagers ascend Bromo's slopes, dressed in ceremonial garments, and gather at the crater's edge to make offerings to the mountain gods. Chickens, fruits, flowers, and even money are cast into the volcano's mouth, a gesture of reverence and gratitude. Some onlookers descend into the crater itself, balancing on narrow ledges and catching the falling offerings in nets, a dangerous act that blurs the lines between devotion and survival. This cultural continuity in the presence of such natural volatility creates an atmosphere at Bromo that feels deeply ancient. It is not just a destination, but a threshold, between the physical and spiritual, the known and the unknowable. The interplay of fire and faith, of ash and ritual, gives Bromo a heartbeat that transcends its modest height. Its activity is frequent, though typically less catastrophic than its more violent Indonesian counterparts like Krakatau or Tambora. Eruptions are often marked by ash plumes that rise several kilometers into the sky, briefly grounding flights and dusting nearby villages in grey. But it is not the destruction that defines Bromo, it is the rhythm. The constant exhalation, the breath of the earth made visible. Even when it sleeps, it seems to dream loudly. Despite its volatility, Bromo is one of Indonesia's most visited natural wonders. Photographers flock here to capture the surreal interplay of light and texture. Couples come to be married above its ancient basin. Monks meditate at the temple near its base, seeking clarity in the wind's hiss and the crater's rumble. And every morning, without fail, dozens of figures stand in silence on distant ridges, watching the sun lift the veil on one of Earth's most improbable places. And yet, for all its beauty, Bromo resists being captured. No photograph can replicate the sting of sulfur in your lungs, the warmth of ash on your skin, or the way the caldera echoes even your softest footsteps. It is a place that must be felt, its emptiness, its fury, its holiness. You do not visit Bromo, you enter into a dialogue with it. A silent exchange that lingers long after you leave, carried like fine dust in the folds of your memory. As the story drifts from Indonesia's smoky, sacred caldera into the colder embrace of Europe once again, the unreal takes a new form, quieter, older, and woven into the hearts of two nations. The Tatra Mountains, a jagged crown straddling the border between Poland and Slovakia, rise like a stone poem from the earth, each peak a stanza carved by wind and ice. They are the highest range of the Carpathian Mountains, and yet, compared to the Alps or the Himalayas, their size is modest. But in spirit, the Tatras are vast. They do not awe through scale alone, but through detail, through their intimate wilderness, mirror-still lakes, whispering forests, and trails that carry stories older than the borders they cross. On maps, the Tatras appear as a relatively compact range, just over 50 kilometers long and barely 20 kilometers wide. But within that space lies a world so concentrated in beauty and variation that it feels endless. The terrain is dramatically alpine, with sharp ridges, deep glacial valleys, and granite peaks that catch the light like chipped diamonds. Their highest summit, Gurlichovsky TT in Slovakia, rises to 2,655 meters, 8,711 feet, while Rysy, the most climbed peak and the highest in Poland, stands at 2,503 meters, 8,212 feet. Yet, height here is never the measure of grandeur. The magic of the Tatras lies in their texture, in how snow clings to crags in spring like forgotten lace, in how blue lakes nestle between ridges as still and secretive as thoughts unspoken. The Polish side, anchored by the town of Zakopane, is perhaps the more visited, especially in the summer months when the trails fill with hikers and wildflower meadows hum with life. Zakopane itself, often dubbed the winter capital of Poland, is a charming, folkloric gateway where wooden houses with steep shingled roofs lean into the mountains like old friends huddled close. From here, countless trails begin, winding their way up into the higher elevations where the landscape begins to shed the noise of civilization. One of the most iconic hikes leads to Morskie Oko, or the Eye of the Sea, a glacial lake ringed by towering cliffs that shimmer with reflected stone and sky. The water is often so calm it seems solid, as if the mountain carved a mirror to admire itself. On the Slovak side, things are wilder, more secluded. The High Tatras, or Vysok Tatry, boast dramatic, nearly vertical granite faces and valleys carved with a glacial elegance. The trails are less crowded, and the silence of the forests is deeper, pierced only by the occasional call of a golden eagle or the rustle of pine needles in a cold breeze. Mountain huts, called charters, offer weary hikers shelter, simple food, and views that are priceless. Many of these huts are only accessible by foot, preserving the sense of being far removed from the rush of the modern world. Here, time is measured not by clocks but by the changing of the light on the cliffs, the first morning frost in autumn, the slow thaw of spring. Though the Tatras may lack the volcanic drama of Etna or Bromo, they hold their own kind of fire, a quiet resilience, a spiritual flame that burns through culture and memory. For centuries, these mountains have stood as symbols of national identity and poetic inspiration. Polish and Slovak folklore is rich with mountain spirits, lost lovers, brave shepherds, and enchanted lakes. One such legend tells of a giant slumbering beneath the range, his breathing forming the valleys, his heartbeat shaking the stones. Others speak of treasures hidden deep within the caves, guarded by mythical beings who reveal themselves only to the pure of heart. These stories are not relegated to the past. They live on in songs, wood carvings, and the deep reverence locals hold for the land. The changing seasons transform the Tatras in ways that feel cinematic. In summer, the green slopes explode with wildflowers, while marmots sun themselves on warm rocks. Streams trickle clear and cold, and the long daylight hours reveal every fold of the landscape. In autumn, the trees ignite with fiery reds and golds, and the air sharpens with the approach of snow. Winter casts a silence across everything. Lakes freeze into glass, trails vanish under deep powder, and the peaks stand ghostly and pale against the sky. Come spring, the meltwater roars from the cliffs and fills the valleys with renewal. Each season here is its own story, equally unreal in its intensity and mood. Hiking in the Tatras is both a physical and emotional journey. The trails, though well-maintained and marked, demand effort, especially the steeper ascents that require scrambling over boulders or gripping chains bolted into rock. Yet with each step comes revelation, a waterfall tumbling through a mossy gorge, a glimpse of a chamois darting across a scree slope, or the sudden, overwhelming stillness of a windless ridge. For those who climb to Risi or Krivar, or to the lakes nestled deep in the valleys like Trbsk Plazo or Popradsky Plazo, there is a recurring realization: this place is not meant to be dominated, but understood. It humbles rather than intimidates. It welcomes without yielding. The wildlife of the Tatras adds to their air of untouched wonder. Lynxes and brown bears still roam these forests, though rarely seen, and the elusive Tatra chamois, a subspecies of goat antelope found only here, navigates the steepest cliffs with effortless grace. Eagles circle the peaks, foxes dart across the paths, and in spring, salamanders emerge from beneath stones, glistening like obsidian in the dew. There are places in the Tatras where no road reaches, where no mechanical sound intrudes, and in those moments, standing beneath a granite spire or beside a crystalline tarn, it becomes painfully clear how rare true wilderness has become. What makes the Tatra Mountains so deeply unreal is not only their natural splendor, but the way they seem to exist in another rhythm altogether, a tempo slower than the world's, tuned to the pulse of stone, snow, and silence. They are one of those rare places where the modern traveler, burdened with technology and timelines, is invited to pause and listen to something far older, far quieter, and infinitely more enduring. And so, the mountains wait, not grandiose in size, but immense in spirit. They are not carved for spectacle, but for reflection. A refuge for poets, wanderers, and those who seek the places between places. The Tatras are not a detour in the unreal geography of Earth. They are its heart. Sharp as a blade, soft as a lullaby, and eternal as the frost that never quite melts from their highest stones. Across the sea from the lush chaos of Java and the smoky breath of Mount Bromo, another Indonesian giant rises, less visited, more remote, and breathtaking in a way that feels entirely personal. Gunung Rinjani, the crown of Lombok Island, is one of the most majestic volcanoes on the planet. At 3,726 meters, 12,224 feet, it is Indonesia's second highest volcano, yet it feels like an entire world unto itself, a place where earth, fire, and water weave a primordial myth that has not stopped unfolding. Unlike other volcanoes that boast singular summits or symmetrical cones, Rinjani holds something rare, a vast caldera crater, inside of which sits a lake, and within that lake, another active volcano rising from the water like a dream folded inside a dream. To see Rinjani from afar is already to be stunned. It dominates the northern skyline of Lombok, its slopes cloaked in rainforest and its peak often veiled in mist. But from within, from the rim or the crater floor, it is a revelation. At the heart of this mighty volcano lies Segera Anak, the child of the sea, a luminous caldera lake with turquoise waters so still, so impossibly vibrant, that it seems summoned from imagination. Its name is a nod to its spiritual power, the sea born anew in the sky, and to the Sasak people who have long considered this place sacred. Towering within Segera Anak is the baby volcano, Gunung Barajari, a younger cone that formed after the catastrophic eruption that collapsed the main structure thousands of years ago. Barajari still spits ash and lava to this day, a child of fire cradled in water and stone. Reaching Rinjani is no simple endeavor. Treks begin from villages like Senaru and Sembalan, climbing steadily through thick jungle, past bamboo groves and cascading waterfalls. The early stages of the journey are lush, humid, alive with the calls of monkeys and the rustling of leaves in the monsoon wind. But as elevation increases, the forest gives way to savanna grasslands and volcanic scree, and the air begins to thin. The trek is grueling, often requiring 2 or 3 days to complete, depending on the route. Yet with every step, the mountain reveals more of its character, not merely a place, but a living entity. Sunsets from the crater rim are among the most spellbinding experiences Earth has to offer. As the sun sinks below the horizon, it casts golden light across the jagged caldera walls and turns the lake into a mirror of flame. Clouds gather below, filling the surrounding valleys in a soft, white sea, and for a moment, it feels as if the entire world has been inverted. Sky below, fire above, silence within. At night, the stars burn bright above the campsite, and the outline of Barajari glows faintly with its own internal ember, exhaling occasional plumes of gas and ash into the darkness. Descending into the crater, a journey of steep, careful scrambling, brings trekkers to the lake's edge, where warm hot springs bubble from the rock, natural pools heated by the geothermal energy of the volcano. Here, exhausted hikers soak their sore muscles, their bodies steaming against the cool air, surrounded by steep cliffs and the gentle lapping of Segura Anak's waters. The lake is cold, deep, and steeped in spiritual meaning. Local Balinese and Sasak communities make annual pilgrimages here, bringing offerings to the water's edge and performing purification rituals. In their worldview, Rinjani is more than a volcano. It is a goddess, a guardian, and a living force deserving of respect and reverence. The scale of the caldera is humbling. Its walls are immense, wrapping around the lake like a protective cocoon. The colors are surreal. Black lava flows streaking across moss-covered rock, sulfur deposits painting the earth in yellows and greens, and the piercing blue of the sky reflected perfectly in the lake below. Every corner of the crater offers a new perspective, a new reminder of nature's strange and sacred artistry. And standing beside Barajari as it quietly smolders is to feel close to the planet's raw heart. You can hear it hiss. You can feel the heat radiating from cracks in the earth. You can sense the mountain's restlessness. Unlike the crowded slopes of Everest or the commercial paths of Rainier, Rinjani remains mostly untouched by mass tourism. Its remoteness, its difficulty, and its ever-changing volcanic temperament have kept it wild. That wildness is its soul. It is a place where weather changes in an instant, where rain can fall in torrents even during the dry season, and where lightning dances over the crater like fireflies in a storm. Many who attempt the summit do not make it. The final ascent is brutal. Loose volcanic ash gives way underfoot, the air grows thin, and every step feels like a question. But for those who persist, the summit offers a panorama unlike any other. The entire island of Lombok spread out below, the Gili Islands shimmering in the sea, and even Bali's Mount Agung visible in the distance on a clear day. Yet, for many, the summit is not the goal. It is the journey into the crater, the communion with Segura Anak, that stays in the heart. There is something deeply personal about this mountain, as if it recognizes each visitor and speaks to them in a voice only they can hear. For some, it is a place of challenge. For others, healing. For still others, mystery. But all leave changed. Rinjani is active, alive, and always evolving. Eruptions have occurred in recent decades, 1994, 2004, 2009, and as recently as 2016, each reshaping the inner landscape of the caldera. Ash plumes rise into the stratosphere, lava flows reshape the shoreline of the lake, and villages miles away watch the mountain with ancient fear and familiarity. The danger is always present, but so is the wonder. The volcano teaches balance, that beauty and threat can coexist, that peace and violence are not opposites but siblings. And perhaps that's why Rinjani feels unreal. Not because it defies belief, but because it contains all contradictions: fire and water, ascent and descent, silence and eruption, life and myth. It is not a mountain you simply climb and descend. It is a mountain you descend into its depths, into your own. A mountain that holds a lake, that holds a volcano, that holds a story. A story that, once touched, never truly ends. Far to the south, in the ancient, glacially carved landscapes of New Zealand's South Island, where air tumbles down from alpine heights and lakes mirror the sky like polished obsidian, there lies a mountain range so fittingly named that it feels less like coincidence and more like prophecy. The Remarkables, standing sentinel over the sparkling resort town of Queenstown, are not merely beautiful, they are arresting. Their name, given in the 1850s by early European settlers, was inspired by the rare phenomenon of a mountain range running directly north to south, an orientation both visually stunning and geographically uncommon. But that reason alone does not explain the sensation one feels upon seeing them for the first time. These mountains don't ease into the landscape. They erupt from it, jagged and vertical, snow-laced spires reaching high above the deep blue waters of Lake Wakatipu. Their symmetry is hypnotic, their presence commanding. In summer, their craggy ridges gleam under golden light, and in winter, they wear a crown of snow so pure it seems alchemical, untouched by time or weather. They form the backdrop to countless photographs, weddings, films, and quiet moments when travelers simply stop and stare, overwhelmed not by what they've read or heard, but by what stands in front of them. From the town below, Queenstown appears almost like a theatre built to celebrate this range. Streets wind along the lakefront, facing directly into the mountain's embrace. The contrast is stark and mesmerizing. Water so still it holds the light like a bowl, and mountains so raw and vertical they seem summoned by some divine architect. It's easy to understand why filmmakers chose this region as the backdrop for Middle-earth. The Remarkables don't just look unreal, they evoke a sense of narrative, of adventure, of worlds just beyond the horizon. In geological terms, the Remarkables are relatively young. Formed by tectonic uplift, they rise sharply from the surrounding landscape without the softening of time seen in older ranges. Their peaks are sharp-edged and their ridgelines dramatic, carved by the chiseling forces of ice and wind. The range's highest point, Double Cone, towers at 2,319 meters, 7,608 feet, and while it's not the tallest in New Zealand by far, it commands attention like few others. Each peak in the range seems to possess its own character, some brooding, some graceful, all unmistakably wild. And wild they are. While Queenstown has grown into a hub of tourism and thrill-seeking, from bungee jumping to jet boating, the Remarkables have resisted domestication. They stand aloof from the playground below, accessible only to those willing to hike or climb into their rugged depths. There are no soft edges here. The trails are steep, the terrain often treacherous, and the weather can turn in moments, transforming sunny skies into swirling fog and sleet. Yet, for those who venture upward, the rewards are immeasurable. During winter, the Remarkables become a kingdom of ice and powder. The Remarkables ski area, perched on the eastern slopes, offers sweeping runs, off-piste adventures, and snowbound solitude that defies the bustle of the town below. But even here, amidst the lifts and lodges, the mountains retain their dominance. The ski field does not tame them, it merely borrows their silence and light for a season. It is in the backcountry beyond the marked trails, along narrow ridges, into frozen cirques, across avalanche-prone bowls, that the true nature of the Remarkables reveals itself, wild, majestic, and indifferent to human pace. In summer, as the snow recedes and the alpine flora returns, the range softens ever so slightly. Grasses wave in the high wind, tiny alpine flowers bloom defiantly between stones, and the sound of meltwater trickling down crevices fills the stillness with music. Hikers trace old routes used by Maori travelers and early European explorers, moving through valleys and over ridges where the air smells of lichen, stone, and sun. The views from the top, down to the braided rivers of the Wakatipu Basin, out across the shimmering lake, toward the horizon where cloud and mountain meet, are so vast they feel mythic. Yet for all their grandeur, the Remarkables are not just wilderness, they are deeply woven into the cultural and spiritual landscape of New Zealand. To the Maori people, the land here is sacred. The region's indigenous name, Te Toma, refers to a legendary figure and the summit of a warrior's path. The peaks, rivers, and valleys form part of the Wakapapa, the genealogical story of the land and its people. This sense of story, of place as an extension of self and ancestry, adds a layer to the Remarkables that no photograph can capture. What also sets these mountains apart is their uncanny ability to change mood, hour by hour, even minute by minute. At dawn, they glow pink and peach, their crags catching the first warmth of the sun. By midday, they stand stark and silver against a blue dome of sky. Come evening, they deepen to indigo, then black, their outlines softened into silhouette against the dying light. Clouds wrap around them like veils, and storms gather over their summits with theatrical menace. No 2 days are the same, and even locals find themselves pausing mid-walk, mid-sentence, to look up and admire the display. For those who linger, who spend days not just seeing but existing alongside the remarkables, a subtle transformation begins. The eye begins to notice the small things, the way snow melts into fissures in early spring, how the lake reflects not just the peaks but their moods, how the wind flows differently on each face of the range. The mountains begin to feel like characters rather than landscape, stoic guardians who say little but speak volumes. And in all of it, there is something deeply, irrevocably unreal. Not because the remarkables defy belief, but because they exceed it. They are more than a backdrop, more than a photo stop, more than a hiking destination. They are a place where time stretches and the present moment deepens, where the boundary between the natural and the mythical blurs. Here, at the bottom of the world, surrounded by silence and stone, the traveler is reminded that some places do not require explanation. They only require stillness. To stand beneath the remarkables is not to understand them. It is to feel their gravity, their solitude, and their wild, ancient welcome. A reminder that the earth still holds places untouched by haste or noise, places that are not merely beautiful, but true. Far from the icy calm of New Zealand's southern latitudes and deep within the northern tropics of South America, a different kind of mountain rises, not cloaked in alpine tidiness or manicured trails, but raw, ancient, and austere. This is Pico Bolivar, the tallest peak in Venezuela, reaching skyward to 4,978 meters, 16,332 feet, its summit often wreathed in cloud and silence. Though it lacks the fame of the Andes giants further south or the glacial glamour of European peaks, Pico Bolivar possesses a gravity that can only be found in landscapes that have endured quietly, forgotten by many, but unyielding in their solitude. Situated in the heart of the Sierra Nevada de Merida, a sub-range of the Greater Andes mountain chain, Pico Bolivar is as much a symbol of Venezuelan identity as it is a physical landmark. Named in honor of Simon Bolivar, the revered liberator of South America, the mountain embodies the spirit of resilience and revolution. Yet despite its national significance, it remains a remote and difficult place, far removed from the easy accessibility of tourist-heavy peaks. Here, no highways snake to scenic lookouts. No wide paved paths ascend to visitor centers. What Pico Bolivar offers instead is silence, challenge, and purity. The mountain looms above the colonial city of Merida, itself a marvel perched at 1,600 meters above sea level. From the town's narrow streets and terracotta rooftops, the high peaks of the Sierra Nevada hover like a forgotten wall between worlds. Rising steeply to the south, Pico Bolivar's jagged profile dominates the skyline, particularly when the rare snow clings to its flanks, an increasingly fleeting spectacle as climate change chips away at the region's high-altitude glacier. In the early 20th century, Pico Bolivar and its neighboring summits were capped year-round with glacier. Now, only remnants remain, fragile and receding, ghosts of what once was. The ascent of Pico Bolivar is not one taken lightly. Though its height might suggest a relatively straightforward climb compared to the towering summits of the Andes or Himalayas, its isolation and technical requirements demand preparation, fitness, and respect. The journey begins in Merida, and until recently, one of the most iconic aspects of that journey was the Teleférico de Merida, the longest and highest cable car system in the world. This engineering marvel carried passengers from the city to an elevation of over 4,700 meters, just shy of the mountain's summit region, drastically reducing the approach time for climbers and hikers. But even then, the final push to the top was and still is no easy feat. From the final station at Pico Espejo, a path known as La Ruta Normal weaves across exposed ridges, scree fields, and fractured rock formations. There is no forest here, no cushioning vegetation or well-marked trail. The terrain is high alpine, sharp, loose, unforgiving. At altitude, every movement feels heavier, every breath thinner. The final segment of the climb involves scrambling and roped climbing over jagged rock faces, with the added hazard of sudden weather changes. Thick clouds can engulf the summit within minutes, reducing visibility to nothing. Rain, hail, and snow are not uncommon, even in the dry season, and the cold bites deep into the bone. And yet, those who reach the summit of Pico Bolivar are rewarded with one of the most surreal and majestic views in the northern Andes. On clear days, the entire Sierra Nevada stretches in all directions, a wilderness of peaks and deep valleys where human presence is reduced to a whisper. The air is razor-sharp, The silence. Total. There are no crowds here, no vendors, no echo of modern life. Just stone, sky, and the flickering awareness that you are standing on the roof of a forgotten Eden. What makes Pico Bolivar truly unreal is not just its remoteness or its views, but its place in a landscape shaped by time and pressure. The mountain's geology speaks of ancient forces, sedimentary and metamorphic rocks uplifted by the slow violence of tectonic collision. Millions of years ago, this land lay under sea. Now it touches the sky. Fossils found in the region hint at long-lost marine ecosystems, a reminder of Earth's ever-shifting nature. It is difficult not to feel the deep hum of that history when your boots crunch against its slopes. The surrounding ecosystem, though sparse at high elevation, is striking in its adaptability. Lower down, the Paramo, a unique Andean highland biome, stretches out in golden, wind-blown grasses and spiny, surreal-looking frailjones, plants that resemble candelabras or living statues. This ecosystem is one of the rarest on Earth, existing only in select parts of South America. The animals here are equally elusive: spectacled bears, Andean condors, mountain tapirs, and hummingbirds that flit between freezing dawns and blinding noons. Life at these heights is hard-earned, and every survival is a triumph. Yet, in recent decades, the very identity of Pico Bolivar has been threatened, not by erosion or natural decay, but by human neglect and environmental change. Political instability in Venezuela has made expeditions more difficult and infrastructure more fragile. The once majestic cable car has faced prolonged closures. The national park system, underfunded and strained, struggles to maintain the trails and safety of remote regions like these. And, perhaps most heartbreakingly, the glacier that once defined the mountain are vanishing before the eyes of those who grew up seeing their gleam in the morning light. Despite this, the mountain endures. And for many Venezuelans, it continues to hold immense symbolic power. It appears on stamps and coins. It looms in paintings and poetry. It is a mountain not just of rock, but of identity. To stand on Pico Bolivar is not just to conquer a climb, it is to engage in dialogue with history, nature, and memory. It is to glimpse the soul of a nation whispered through wind and stone. There are no visitor centers selling postcards up here, no railings to protect you from the edge. The experience remains elemental. You are alone with the mountain, as countless before you have been, and you understand quickly that this place does not exist to impress you. It exists because the earth rose here once and never fell again. It is real, and yet feels entirely apart from the everyday world, a rugged dreamscape hidden in the clouds. And when you descend, when your boots touch lower, warmer ground again, there's a part of you left behind at that summit. A part still watching condors circle above jagged ridgelines, still listening to the stillness, still trying to believe that such a place could truly exist. There are mountains that inspire or through sheer force of nature, and then there are those that carry with them the weight of legend, ancient, mythical, and eternal. Mount Ararat, rising solemnly in eastern Turkey near the borders of Armenia and Iran, is not merely a geological feature. It is a story carved in stone, a white sentinel on the horizon that has watched civilizations rise and fall beneath its gaze. Towering at 5,137 meters, 16,854 feet, this dormant stratovolcano is the highest point in modern-day Turkey, and one of the most symbolically rich mountains in the world. Its slopes are stark and vast, its peak eternally snow-covered, its silhouette unmistakable, immense and solitary against the wide, arid plain. Ararat is most famously associated with the biblical tale of Noah's Ark. According to the book of Genesis, after the great flood that washed over the earth, it was on the mountains of Ararat that the ark came to rest as the waters receded. This single line in scripture has given Ararat a mystique that stretches far beyond theology. Over centuries, the idea of the ark lying fossilized somewhere on its icy flanks has ignited the imagination of explorers, archaeologists, mystics, and dreamers. Expeditions have come and gone, some claiming to find evidence, wooden beams, ship-like formations frozen in the ice, but no proof has ever been universally accepted. And yet, the legend lives on, growing not weaker but stronger, as if the mountain itself guards the secret, too dignified to reveal it, too old to care. Standing alone on the Anatolian plateau, Ararat's grandeur is magnified by its isolation. There are no major peaks surrounding it to diminish its scale. It rises like a titan, its base sprawling and wide, its twin summits, Greater Ararat and the adjacent Little Ararat, emerging from the earth as if sculpted by divine hands. The upper slopes are perpetually draped in snow, even under the summer sun, while the lower elevations shift in hue with the seasons. Brown and dry in summer, silver-frosted in winter, blooming briefly with alpine flowers in spring. The snowcap at its peak gleams in the first light of morning like polished ivory and glows with a soft blue under moonlight, making it appear suspended between heaven and earth. For those who have lived in its shadow for generations, Armenians, Kurds, Turks, Ararat is more than a mountain. It is heritage. For Armenians in particular, it is a symbol of identity and resilience, despite the peak now lying across the Turkish border. It features prominently in Armenian literature, art, and national consciousness, often depicted as both a lost home and an eternal witness. Even in Yerevan, Armenia's capital, Mount Ararat looms large in the national psyche. It can be seen clearly from the city on most days, its snow-covered peak rising just across the border, unreachable yet ever-present. Climbing Mount Ararat is both a physical and emotional endeavor. Though dormant, the mountain is still technically volcanic, with its last eruption occurring in 1840. The standard ascent typically begins from the village of Dubayazd, nestled in the mountain's northeastern shadow. Climbers usually spend several days acclimatizing, with base camps established at around 3,200 meters and a high camp near 4,200 meters. The final ascent begins in the early hours of the morning, when the ice is firm and the wind is calm. As you ascend, the terrain shifts from alpine meadows to volcanic scree to ice-covered slopes that require crampons and axes. The thin air at high altitude bites the lungs, and the silence deepens with every step. But when the summit is reached, the world changes. From this vantage, the vastness of Anatolia unfolds in every direction. On clear days, you can see into Armenia and Iran. The horizon bends slightly with the curvature of the earth. Below, the clouds gather like white seas, and the wind is ancient, dry, and ceaseless. Standing here, on this revered peak, the legends that surround it no longer seem so improbable. The silence feels sacred. The stones seem older than time. It is easy, achingly easy, to believe that a great ark could have once settled here, its timbers embedded in the ice, its story frozen in place. Yet for all its prominence, Mount Ararat is a paradoxical presence, deeply known and yet inaccessible, famous and yet mysterious. Its location in a politically sensitive region has meant that access to the mountain has, at times, been restricted. Border tensions, military zones, and ongoing cultural complexities have often kept it out of reach for researchers and travelers alike. Even today, climbing requires a permit and the accompaniment of a licensed guide. But perhaps that very difficulty is part of what preserves Ararat's mystery. In an age where so much of the earth has been mapped, photographed, and commodified, Ararat remains a place that resists complete understanding. The wildlife that roams its lower slopes is equally emblematic of its untamed nature. Wolves, foxes, bears, and ibex still live in its remote valleys, their tracks fading quickly in the dust or snow. Birdsong echoes across ravines untouched by human noise. Alpine flowers, hardy and fleeting, bloom in crevices and disappear with the frost. There are no ski lifts here, no paved summit trails, no visitor centers. Ararat offers nothing easy, and in that difficulty lies its purity. The changing climate, however, poses a new kind of threat. The glacier atop Ararat has been slowly retreating, its once thick ice thinning year by year. Scientists and mountaineers alike have noted the shrinking snowfields and exposed rock faces that were once buried beneath meters of ancient ice. What does it mean for a mountain so steeped in myth to lose its crown of snow? What happens to the legends when the physical landscape shifts beneath them? These questions linger in the air, unanswered. And still, the mountain remains. Towering, glowing, silent. Each sunrise paints it anew. Each storm scours its surface clean. Travelers speak of the way it seems to appear and disappear with the weather. One moment clear and solid, the next veiled and intangible, like a mirage. But those who have seen it, who have stood beneath it or climbed its flanks, carry something with them forever. The feeling of being in the presence of something both greater and older than themselves. Not just a mountain, but a monument. Not just geography, but legacy. Ararat does not need adornment. It needs no resort, no legend, no flag at its peak. It simply stands. And in its standing, it tells stories in silence. Stories of flood and fire, of borders and belief, of endurance without praise. It is real, yes. But it also belongs to that class of places that feel somehow beyond the reach of ordinary experience. Unreal not because they are false, but because they feel more true than the world below. The wind moves differently in the deserts of the Sinai Peninsula. It does not rush or scream, but rather glides across the sand like a whisper carried through time. Amid this landscape of ochre cliffs and sun-bleached silence, there rises a mountain that has, for thousands of years, drawn pilgrims, seekers, and wanderers alike. Mount Sinai, also known as Jebel Musa, is not the tallest peak in Egypt, nor the most imposing in shape. But it holds a gravity that defies its modest height of 2,285 meters, 7,497 feet. This is a mountain where the sacred feels tangible, where silence speaks in the voice of history, and where the unreal lies not in spectacle, but in the weight of meaning layered into every stone. Mount Sinai is steeped in the deepest currents of Abrahamic tradition. According to the book of Exodus, it was here, upon this mountain, that Moses received the 10 Commandments from God. Fire and smoke cloaked the summit, the people trembled below, and divine law was etched into stone. Whether one reads these words as literal truth or ancient myth, the impact is the same. Sinai is one of the spiritual heartbeats of the human story, a place where the mortal is said to have touched the infinite. And even today, as the modern world whirls with noise and distraction, Sinai remains eerily quiet, reverent, as if still waiting for some greater voice to return. The approach to the mountain already feels like stepping into a story. Most visitors begin their journey from the town of St. Catherine, nestled at the foot of the Sinai Range. The town is modest, quiet, ringed by cliffs that catch the morning sun and turn red as if blushing with memory. Within it lies the venerable St. Catherine's Monastery, a Greek Orthodox sanctuary dating back to the 6th century, built on what is believed to be the site of the Burning Bush, a cornerstone of Judeo-Christian law. With its fortress walls, ancient icons, and fragile manuscripts, the monastery is itself a marvel. It has stood through empires, wars, and centuries of pilgrimage, continuing even now to be a living center of faith. But it is the climb that reveals the true nature of Sinai. There are 2 primary routes to the summit, each steeped in rhythm and tradition. The first is the camel path, a gradual, winding ascent that takes several hours and is often trodden by pilgrims at night, lanterns flickering in the dark, the stars burning fiercely overhead. The second route is the more direct, more grueling stairway of repentance, a stair-like path of over 3,000 hand-carved stone steps, laid by monks centuries ago. Both routes converge near the summit, where a final ascent leads to a plateau strewn with rock, wind, and wonder. The experience of climbing Sinai in the pre-dawn darkness is one that many describe as dreamlike. The air is cold and thin. The silence, total. Only the shuffling of footsteps and the occasional murmur of prayer breaks the hush. As the hours pass, the stars begin to recede, and the eastern sky blooms with the faintest orange. Then, with shocking speed, the sun breaches the horizon, and the world erupts into light. From the summit, the desert spreads out in endless folds of rust and gold, each mountain casting long shadows across the sand. The rocks glow crimson, and for a moment, it becomes clear why this place has always been considered holy. There is no cathedral, no temple, no sanctuary built by human hands that matches the grandeur of Sinai at sunrise. What is truly unreal about Mount Sinai is not just its beauty, but the layering of centuries upon centuries of reverence. It is a crossroads of belief, sacred not only to Jews and Christians, but to Muslims as well. In Islamic tradition, the mountain is referred to as Jebel Musa and is also revered as a place of divine encounter. Pilgrims from all 3 faiths have climbed it for generations, offering prayers, lighting candles, or simply sitting in quiet reflection. It is rare in the modern world to find a place where such a convergence exists, not in tension, but in peace. The mountain itself, geologically speaking, is a part of the Arabian-Nubian Shield, composed of some of the Earth's oldest exposed rocks. These ancient formations have witnessed the entire human saga in silence, from nomadic tribes to empires, from prophets to modern travelers with smartphones and hiking boots. Yet even with the passage of millennia, the mountain has changed little. There are no ski lifts or tourist trams here. No cafes or neon lights. Just sand, stone, and time. Flora and fauna in this region are sparse, adapted to the harshness of the desert climate. But amid the starkness, life finds a foothold. Desert foxes scurry across the lower slopes. Ravens circle the sky, their wings black against the blinding sun. Hardy shrubs cling to cracks in the rock, their roots drawing moisture from the dry earth like whispered secrets. In the spring, small, defiant flowers sometimes bloom along the path, brilliant flashes of life in a world ruled by stone and silence. Despite its spiritual fame, Sinai is never crowded. Perhaps it is the harshness of the climb or the remoteness of its location, but there's a sense that only those who are truly drawn to the mountain make the journey. And those who do often describe a shift, subtle but profound. Time slows. The noise of daily life recedes. What remains is presence, the feel of the rock beneath one's feet, the breathless air, the glow of first light. Here, in this stark, high desert, the spiritual is not a sermon or a song, but a sensation. A stillness that feels eternal. For many, Sinai is not a place to conquer but to witness. There is no need to shout at the summit or raise a flag. The reward lies in the silence, in the sense of being part of something that has held meaning for thousands of years. A part of something vast and unknowable. A part of something, quite simply, greater. And perhaps that is what makes Mount Sinai one of the most unreal places on Earth. Not its height, not its dramatic cliffs or sun-baked trails, but the feeling it gives, that somewhere in the layers of history, myth, and stone, there still lingers the echo of a voice. One that called a prophet to climb. One that shaped a people. One that still, somehow, waits in the wind. Where the icy wilderness of southeastern Alaska brushes against the remote wilds of the Yukon, a colossal force of nature rises with almost unnatural abruptness. Mount St. Elias, the second highest peak in both the United States and Canada at 5,489 meters, 18,008 feet, is not merely impressive in height, it is monumental in presence. What sets it apart is not just its raw elevation, but the sheer drama of its ascent. Rising from tidewater at the edge of the Gulf of Alaska to its glaciated summit in just 16 kilometers, 10 miles, St. Elias boasts one of the steepest vertical ascents from sea level on the planet. It doesn't gradually build itself into the sky, it surges, towering over the surrounding coastal plain with impossible speed, a jagged throne of snow and stone at the edge of the world. To see it for the first time, especially from a plane flying the wild coastal routes, is to witness a contradiction. There is no build-up, no gentle hills hinting at greater heights to come. The mountain simply appears, immense and blinding, its summit often obscured by towering clouds that seem drawn to it like moths to a flame. Surrounded by glacier that pour toward the ocean like frozen rivers of time, and shrouded in some of the harshest weather systems on Earth, St. Elias is not just remote. It is forbidding. Other mountains may welcome climbers. St. Elias challenges them, dares them. Named by the Danish explorer Vitus Bering in 1741 when he sighted its shining peak from offshore during a Russian expedition, the mountain has long loomed large in the minds of those who explore these polar extremes. But long before Bering's gaze reached its white-capped summit, the indigenous Tlingit people knew it by the name Yasideh Shah, meaning mountain behind icy bay. For them, it was not simply a physical place but a spiritual and ancestral landmark, woven into their songs, their stories, and their understanding of the natural world. In a region where nature cannot be tamed, St. Elias was a god among mountains. Geologically, Mount St. Elias is a monument to tectonic violence. It sits at the junction of the Pacific and North American plates, in one of the most seismically active regions on Earth. Its dramatic uplift is a direct result of these forces, immense tectonic pressure folding the crust like fabric, forcing ancient rock upward at astonishing speeds over the span of millions of years. It is surrounded by a kingdom of ice. The St. Elias Mountains, of which it is the crown jewel, contain some of the largest non-polar ice fields in the world, including the massive Malaspina Glacier to the south, a lobe of ice larger than some US states, curling into the forest like a frozen tidal wave. Climbing Mount St. Elias is a feat undertaken only by the most experienced and determined mountaineers. It's not just the height, it's the remoteness, the extreme weather, the avalanche-prone slopes, and the crevasse-ridden glacier that make it one of the most challenging climbs in North America. Unlike popular high peaks like Denali or Rainier, St. Elias sees very few successful ascents each year. The logistics alone are staggering. Most expeditions require chartered bush planes or helicopters just to access a suitable base camp, and once on the mountain, climbers face a gauntlet of technical terrain, long glacier crossings, steep ice faces, and some of the worst weather in the climbing world. Storms can roll in with almost no warning, bringing hurricane-force winds, whiteouts, and deadly temperatures. The isolation is total. There are no rescue stations nearby, no roads, no support infrastructure. If something goes wrong, and often it does, the mountain offers no easy retreat. In fact, St. Elias has developed a reputation not just for its beauty and difficulty, but for its indifference. It does not care who climbs it. It does not reward summit bids. It simply exists, immense, ancient, and cold. And yet, those few who stand atop its summit describe a sensation that borders on the supernatural. From that high, remote vantage point, one sees the curvature of the earth, the infinite expanse of ice fields in every direction, and the shimmering blue of the Gulf of Alaska far below. It is a view granted to almost no one on the planet. Even from lower camps, the scale of the surrounding wilderness defies comprehension. Glacier crack and groan with seismic force. The air is so clear and dry it seems stripped of time itself. The light reflects off snow and ice in a way that makes everything appear suspended, silent, as if the mountain holds its breath between ages. What makes Mount St. Elias truly unreal, however, is not just its physicality, it's the sheer contrast it embodies. Here is a mountain that begins almost at sea level, where fishing boats bob in icy bay and brown bears fish in salmon-rich rivers. From there, within sight of the coastline, the land rises into glacial wilderness, then into vertical alpine, and finally into the death zone of high-altitude mountaineering, all in a single, unbroken sweep. It's as if all the layers of Earth's climate zones and landscapes have been compressed into one enormous, frozen monolith. There is also the eerie, almost otherworldly sense of time that pervades the region. The glacier here are thousands of years old, yet constantly in motion, moving, groaning, carving into icebergs that drift silently into the Pacific. Some sections of ice still contain the ash of ancient volcanic eruptions or the trapped air of pre-industrial atmospheres. Climbing the slopes of St. Elias is, in a way, a walk through time, where each step up is a step deeper into Earth's memory. The ice beneath one's feet is not merely frozen water, it is history, compressed and preserved in a world too harsh for decay. And then, there is the solitude. On this mountain, there are no lines of climbers, no base camp bazaars, no celebratory photos at the summit shared online in real time. There is only snow and stone, silence and sky. The summit register, if you find it, is sparse, only a few names scrawled over decades. Most attempts fail, turned back by weather or icefall or sheer exhaustion. And yet, in that failure, St. Elias teaches something profound. It reminds the climber, the observer, the dreamer, that not all mountains exist to be summit. Some exist to be honored, to be glimpsed, to be felt. St. Elias is not a mountain you visit. It is one you approach. And when you leave, you don't just carry memories. You carry silence, awe, and perhaps a quieter kind of reverence for the Earth's raw, untouched places. It is real, undeniably. But like all truly unreal places, it feels like it shouldn't be. It feels like a dream anchored in ice. It rises steeply and defiantly behind one of the most iconic archaeological sites in the world. Sharp, green, and enigmatic, framed in nearly every photograph of Machu Picchu and immortalized in the mind's eye of travelers who have never even set foot in South America. Huayna Picchu, or Young Peak in Quechua, is not the tallest mountain in the Andes, nor the most remote, but it may well be one of the most haunting. It looms like a guardian over the lost city of the Inca, draped in mist and mystery, standing as both a backdrop and a key to understanding the sacred geometry of one of history's most astonishing civilizations. At 2,720 meters, 8,920 feet, above sea level, Huayna Picchu is only modestly higher than the Machu Picchu citadel it watches over, but what it lacks in extreme altitude it more than makes up for in drama. Its slopes are so steep they appear almost vertical when viewed from the sacred plaza below, its spine wrapped in vegetation and cloud. It's a mountain that doesn't simply sit in the landscape, it rises like a question mark from the jungle, a vertical enigma that demands more than a glance. And for centuries, it remained unknown to the outside world, as hidden as the ruins it shadows. To reach Huayna Picchu is to first arrive at Machu Picchu itself, already one of the most surreal places on Earth. Nestled in the saddle between the Huayna Picchu and Machu Picchu peaks, the Inca city seems almost suspended between heaven and earth, wrapped in clouds and serenaded by the rush of the Urubamba River far below. The site was never discovered by the Spanish conquistadors. It lay hidden in the high jungle until American historian Hiram Bingham stumbled upon it in 1911, guided by local farmers and shepherds who knew of the ruins all along. Ever since, it has captivated imaginations worldwide. Yet even amid the grandeur of Machu Picchu, with its temples, terraces, and perfect stonework, Huayna Picchu beckons. The trail to its summit is narrow, dizzying, and not for the faint of heart. It snakes its way up the nearly vertical side of the mountain, climbing through tropical cloud forest, over ancient Inca staircases carved directly into the rock, with sudden drop-offs and no railings to catch a misstep. In many places, the path clings to the cliffside, exposed to the sheer valley below. It is a trail of adrenaline and awe, where every step is a choice between fear and wonder. Those who brave the ascent are rewarded not only with unmatched views of Machu Picchu laid out below, its agricultural terraces like green staircases, its stone buildings aligned with celestial precision, but also with the strange and powerful silence that envelops the summit. The noise of other travelers disappears. The wind picks up, whispering through the orchids and bromeliads clinging to the rocks. The clouds drift and part. And suddenly, the entire Urubamba River Valley is visible, snaking in serpentine curves around jungle-clad peaks that roll away like the folds of a green tapestry. Yet Huayna Picchu is more than a viewpoint. It was a sacred space to the Inca themselves. Archaeological remnants on the summit and along its ridges suggest ceremonial use. Small temples, agricultural terraces, and dwellings are scattered among the rocks, many almost camouflaged by vegetation. The structures, while less imposing than those in the main city, were clearly built with the same astonishing craftsmanship. Dry stone walls perfectly aligned, niches cut with razor-sharp precision, and paths that follow the natural contours of the land with uncanny ease. This was not an afterthought. Huayna Picchu was integral to the sacred landscape. It's believed that the Inca elite, perhaps priests or astronomers, climbed the mountain for ritual purposes. The alignment of Huayna Picchu with surrounding peaks may have played a role in their calendar and cosmology. From its summit, the solstices and equinoxes take on heightened meaning, with the sun rising and setting in alignment with distant mountains and valleys. The Inca saw geography not just as terrain, but as sacred architecture, a language of stone and sky. And Huayna Picchu was one of its most potent syllables. One of the more enigmatic ruins on the mountain is the so-called Temple of the Moon, located on a hidden path along the backside of the peak. This ceremonial complex, partly built into a cave, features fine masonry and sacred niches, and it's thought to have been a site of initiation or burial. Very few make it here. The trail is harder, less maintained, and often closed due to landslides. But those who do speak of the atmosphere there as palpably different, heavy with stillness, infused with reverence, almost untouched by the centuries that have passed. What gives Huayna Picchu its unreal quality is not just its setting or its scale, it is the synthesis of nature and human intention, the way stone and jungle seem to have conspired to hide something precious. Even now, as visitor limits and timed entry systems restrict the number of climbers to a few hundred per day, the mountain remains surprisingly silent, contemplative. There is no commercialization here, no vendors at the summit, no signs beyond the warnings of narrow ledges and slick steps. There is only you, the sky, the ruins, and the knowing mountain beneath your feet. And perhaps that's the greatest power of Huayna Picchu, that feeling of being watched not by history, but by the land itself. The jungle breathes. The rocks remember. You are no longer merely a traveler, you are a witness. A brief flicker of presence in a place that has outlived empires and will outlast nations. When the clouds roll back over the peak and the trail begins to vanish behind you, it feels less like leaving a mountain and more like stepping out of a waking dream. In the end, Huayna Picchu remains unreal not because it is unknown, but because even in full view, framed in photographs, climbed by thousands, it still retains its mystery. It is a place where time slows, where myths feel just within reach, and where the line between nature and spirit is as narrow as the stone steps clinging to its face. To ascend, it is to climb through layers of mist and memory. To descend is to carry something quietly transformative, etched not in stone, but in soul. Deep within the rugged heart of Morocco, where the desert winds rise to meet the sky and the ancient peaks of the high Atlas pierce the horizon with jagged confidence, stands Jebel Toubkal, the roof of North Africa. At 4,167 meters, 13,671 feet, this mountain is not only the highest point in Morocco, but the tallest in the entire Maghreb region. Yet it is not merely a mountain of numbers. It is a monument of earth and spirit, where Berber tradition, raw wilderness, and an otherworldly sense of place converge in a harmony that feels untouched by the noise of modernity. It is unreal not because it denies reality, but because it reminds one of a reality more primal, more grounded, and more eternal than we are used to. The journey to Jebel Toubkal begins far below its snow-streaked summit, in the red-dusted foothills of the Atlas Mountains where olive trees grow wild and the calls to prayer drift lazily across villages built from sun-baked clay. Here, the town of Imlil serves as the launching point for nearly every expedition to the peak. At 1,740 meters, 5,708 feet, Imlil is a small, unassuming settlement nestled in a narrow valley, where stone houses cling to the slopes and mules carry supplies along the same trails Berber villagers have walked for generations. The people here are as much a part of the mountain as its wind-scoured ridgelines, resilient, warm, and deeply rooted in their land. From Imlil, the trail winds upwards through groves of walnut trees and alpine scrub, across rocky outcrops and past small mosques perched improbably on the sides of cliffs. The landscape transitions gradually from green to golden to grey, until the vegetation fades entirely and only the skeleton of the mountain remains. Bare rock and stubborn lichens clinging to life in the harsh alpine air. Along the route, shrines known as marabouts appear, tombs of local saints, wrapped in flags or nestled in stone alcoves, testifying to the spiritual thread that winds through this landscape. Here, nature is not merely admired, it is revered. At 3,200 meters, the Toubkal refuge comes into view, a cluster of stone buildings surrounded by rock and snow. This is where most climbers rest before the final ascent. The nights here are cold and sharp, the air thin and brittle. Stars blaze above with undiluted clarity, and the silence is profound. You lie awake in a sleeping bag, aware of the mountain's bulk above you, aware too that even now, before you've climbed it, Toubkal has already begun to change you. The summit push begins before dawn. Headlamps pierce the darkness as hikers begin the slow, deliberate trudge up steep scree and frozen switchbacks. The wind howls, unpredictable and sharp, as the ridge narrows and the world below begins to vanish into shadows. There is no glamour in this climb. It is dusty. It is cold. It is hard. But as the eastern sky begins to glow, first purple, then orange, then gold, you realize that the difficulty is the price of revelation. And then, after hours of struggle, the summit appears. A rusted metal pyramid marks the top, a strange and beautiful geometric contrast to the wild stone beneath it. From here, the views are staggering. To the north, the fertile plains of Marrakesh shimmer in the distance, and beyond them, the faint trace of the Atlantic Ocean. To the south, the Sahara begins, vast, infinite, a sea of dunes that swallows the horizon. You can see the line where the green ends and the red begins, the point where mountain becomes desert. And all around, the Atlas Mountains roll in waves, serrated, timeless, and utterly magnificent. Standing atop Jebel Toubkal is like standing on a hinge between worlds. The wind carries both snow and sand. The view encompasses both the known and the unknowable. There is no sense of conquest here, no flag planting or declarations of triumph. Only quiet awe. For this mountain does not yield to you. You are simply permitted to stand on its shoulder for a moment, to witness the land as it has been seen for thousands of years, by shepherds, mystics, travelers, and tribes. The Berber culture that surrounds Toubkal adds a layer of richness that few peaks can claim. This is not a landscape separated from its people. It is intimately entwined with their stories, their language, their way of life. You pass villages that seem to defy gravity, clinging to cliffsides, their walls painted in natural pigments, their people weaving rugs by hand or guiding goats across impossible slopes. The rhythm of life here follows the sun, the season, and the mountain. And the mountain, in return, provides water from its springs, grazing from its slopes, and meaning in its presence. Jebel Toubkal is also a mountain of contrasts. In summer, its lower valleys blaze with color, wildflowers, almond blossoms, and green terraces irrigated by hand-built aqueducts. In winter, snow cloaks its summit, and the climb becomes a technical alpine adventure, requiring crampons and ice axes. It is not a tourist trap. It has not been polished for convenience. There are no gondolas, no paved switchbacks. What Toubkal offers is authenticity, a raw, unmediated encounter with nature and culture that feels increasingly rare in the modern world. And there is something in its very shape that evokes reverence. Unlike the perfect cones of volcanic peaks, Toubkal rises in a long, weathered crown, its ridgelines like the wings of some ancient sleeping creature. The mountain does not try to impress. It simply is, solid, enduring, and vast. And perhaps that is what makes it feel unreal. Not because it defies logic, but because it defies the rush and chaos of modernity. In a world that constantly accelerates, Toubkal waits. It changes with the seasons, but not with the trends. It has no need to be discovered. It was never lost. As you descend, legs aching, skin windburned, and lungs still adjusting to the thicker air, the mountain seems to recede slowly behind you. And yet, it stays with you. In the rhythm of your footsteps. In the patterns of the stone. In the silence that you now carry within you like a hidden ember. You may leave Jebel Toubkal, but some part of you remains there, etched into the dust, the wind, the snow. For those who come to this mountain with open eyes and steady hearts, it offers something deeper than adventure. It offers perspective. A reordering of what matters. A glimpse into a slower, older world where the land speaks quietly, and you must slow down to hear it. There are places in the world where mountains rise like a wall, monumental and impenetrable. But then there are peaks that seem to leap from the earth with the grace of a flame, sharp, radiant, untamed. Monte Fitzroy, known locally as Cerro Fitzroy or simply El Chorlton, is one such mountain. Rising to 3,405 meters, 11,171 feet, in the windswept southern Andes of Argentine Patagonia, it does not dominate the region by sheer height alone. It commands attention through its form, its solitude, and the impossible interplay of light and stone that sets its flanks ablaze with color. When the first rays of sunrise strike its granite spires, the peak glows with such fierce orange and pink that it appears almost otherworldly, like the mountain itself has caught fire. Set within the Los Glaciers National Park, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, Fitzroy lies near the small frontier town of El Chorlton, a settlement born of rugged necessity and maintained through reverence for the land that surrounds it. The town is remote, accessible only by a long road through barren steppe, but its isolation is part of its power. Here, the Andes rise abruptly from vast plains, their jagged silhouettes etched like teeth against the sky. Among them, Fitzroy is unmistakable, its central needle flanked by serrated ridges and smaller spires that seem to claw at the clouds. But what makes Fitzroy truly unreal isn't just its shape, it's the way it interacts with the sky. Photographers, climbers, and trekkers have long been drawn to this peak not only for its challenges but for its moods. The mountain is rarely still. Clouds sweep across it in ever-changing waves. Winds roar down its slopes at speeds that can knock a hiker to the ground. And yet, in rare, golden moments, when the weather parts and the sun rises low in the horizon, the mountain transforms. Its sheer eastern face, polished by eons of wind and ice, catches the light and burns, first deep crimson, then rose, then pale peach before fading into the hard silver of day. It is an experience not just seen, but felt, like witnessing a secret the earth was never meant to reveal. The indigenous Te-Welche people called the mountain Chorlton, which means smoking mountain, not because it was volcanic, but because its summit was so often shrouded in mist and cloud that it seemed to breathe. European explorers later renamed it Fitzroy in honor of Robert Fitzroy, the captain of the HMS Beagle, the ship that carried Charles Darwin on his legendary voyage. But despite the renaming, the soul of Chorlton has never been subdued. It remains wild, sacred, and daunting. Unlike more accessible peaks, Fitzroy is fiercely difficult to summit. Its steep granite faces and unpredictable weather make it one of the most technically challenging climbs on the planet. Even experienced mountaineers often wait days, sometimes weeks, for a weather window that will allow a safe attempt. There are no easy routes. Every ascent involves vertical rock climbing, ice, and exposure to sudden storms that can roll in from the Southern Ocean without warning. The mountain has humbled some of the best alpinists in the world, and it is not uncommon for expeditions to return without a summit, carrying instead the weight of awe and respect. Yet for the majority who don't attempt its summit, Fitzroy offers something equally profound from below. The trekking routes around the mountain form one of the world's great wilderness circuits. Trails wind through Lenga forests, across glacial moraines, and beside turquoise lakes fed by icefalls. One of the most popular treks leads to Laguna de los Tres, a glacial lake that mirrors Fitzroy's towering profile. Standing on the rocky shore of this lake at dawn, as the sky shifts through its painterly palette and the peak erupts in alpenglow, is a moment that seems to suspend time. The silence here is vast, broken only by the creak of glacier or the distant call of an Andean condor circling high above. Despite its remote setting, the region is surprisingly biodiverse. Guanacos graze the open plains like ghosts from the Ice Age. Foxes dart through the brush with wary grace. The Andean condor, one of the largest flying birds on Earth, rides the thermals with majestic ease, its shadow sweeping across the valley like a silent blessing. And above it all, Fitzroy looms, unmoving, indifferent, eternal. Fitzroy is a mountain that does not accommodate. It offers no paved roads, no cable cars, no shelter at its summit. What it offers instead is authenticity, an unfiltered connection to the raw forces of geology and time. To stand beneath it is to understand the scale of your own existence against the canvas of deep earth time. The granite of Fitzroy formed tens of millions of years ago, thrust upward through volcanic forces and sculpted by glacial erosion over endless millennia. Every crack in the rock, every polished face, every sharp spire is a record of those eons, written not in words but in stone. And yet, for all its inaccessibility and harshness, Fitzroy remains deeply magnetic. Artists, philosophers, and poets have written of its beauty. Climbers dream of it. Hikers yearn to see it on a clear day. And those who do are changed. It is a place that sharpens the senses and expands the spirit. A place where the line between reality and dream blurs, not because of illusion, but because the truth of the landscape is more vivid than anything the mind could imagine. Fitzroy is not just a mountain. It is a mirror held up to the soul. It asks nothing of you but presence. It does not care whether you summit or not. It offers no forgiveness for arrogance, no reward for speed. What it gives instead is clarity, of vision, of scale, of self. In its shadow, you remember that the earth is not merely a place to be walked upon, but a force that shapes us. And when the light hits just right, and the peak glows like a torch against the Patagonian sky, you realize that some places are not meant to be understood. They are meant to be felt. In the wild heart of New Zealand's North Island, where the land simmers with volcanic energy and ancient Maori legends still echo through the hills, rises a peak of cinematic fame and elemental power, Mount Ngauruhoe. Perfectly conical, dark, and brooding, this 2,291-meter, 7,516-foot stratovolcano is one of the youngest and most active volcanoes in the Ngauruhoe volcanic complex. It is a mountain that feels alive, its slopes marked by both the scars of recent eruptions and the lingering heat of deep earth forces. To stand in its presence is to sense a primal volatility, the feeling that the earth beneath your feet might still wake in anger. To many across the world, this mountain is instantly recognizable, not from geography textbooks or mountaineering accounts, but from the haunting landscapes of Middle-earth. Peter Jackson chose Ngauruhoe as the cinematic stand-in for Mount Doom in The Lord of the Rings, the smoldering, cursed volcano into which the One Ring must be cast. It was a perfect choice. Ngauruhoe, with its dark basalt flanks, steep sides, and ever-present sense of unease, projects a mood that is both mythic and menacing. Even without CGI, it radiates an ancient and perilous majesty. But long before Hollywood claimed its image, Ngauruhoe was sacred to the Maori people. It is not merely a mountain, it is a tupuna, an ancestor, with its own mana, spiritual essence, and wairua, soul. The entire Ngauruhoe National Park, of which Ngauruhoe is a part, is imbued with deep cultural and spiritual significance. In fact, the park was the first in the world to be gifted to a nation by its indigenous people. In 1887, Tuhiuhiu Tukino IV, the paramount chief of Ngāi Tuatoa, offered the peaks of Ngauruhoe, Ngauruhoe, and Ruapepu to the crown, not for ownership, but for protection. It was an act of deep reverence and foresight, ensuring the guardianship of these sacred lands for future generations. The mountain itself is a relatively young feature on the landscape. Though it rises with the stately grace of something ancient, Ngauruhoe began forming only about 2,500 years ago, a blink in geological time. Its conical shape is the result of frequent eruptions, over 70 recorded since 1839, making it one of New Zealand's most active volcanoes in modern history. Its last major eruption occurred in 1977, and while it has remained quiet since, it is by no means dormant. The mountain still exhales heat and gas through hidden vents and fumaroles, whispering reminders of the inferno that slumbers below. The most popular way to experience Ngauruhoe is as part of the Tongariro Alpine Crossing, often described as one of the best one-day hikes in the world. This 19.4-kilometer trail winds through a surreal landscape of lava flows, emerald lakes, steaming craters, and shattered rock fields, all under the watchful eye of Ngauruhoe's towering form. For those with the stamina and respect for the land, a side hike to the summit of the volcano is possible. But the climb is punishing. There are no marked trails, just loose scree and ash that shifts under every step, making the ascent a battle against gravity, heat, and exhaustion. At the summit, the view is both beautiful and brutal. The crater itself is vast, bowl-shaped, and stained in rusty reds and sulfuric yellows. Steam sometimes rises from fissures along the rim. The silence up here feels unnatural, like the pause before a storm. Surrounding the mountain are the high volcanic plateaus of Tongariro and the snow-dusted slopes of Mount Ruapehu, New Zealand's highest volcano. On clear days, the landscape seems to stretch into other worlds, jagged, scorched, and improbably still. What makes Ngauruhoe truly unreal, though, is not just its physicality. It's the tension it embodies between myth and geology, fiction and fact. The shadow of the Lord of the Rings lingers heavily here. Visitors speak of feeling like they're walking through the very heart of Mordor, and it's easy to see why. The land is raw. It is not friendly. The rocks are sharp, the wind bites, and there's little green to soften the terrain. But for the Maori, this is not Mordor. It is sacred, not sinister. A place of tapu, spiritual restriction, not doom. And therein lies the deeper unrealness of Ngauruhoe. It carries multiple meanings simultaneously, layered and often conflicting. To some, it is a place of fantasy. To others, it is alive with ancestral presence. This contrast is nowhere more apparent than when a traveler, perhaps drawn by the film's legacy, finds themselves overwhelmed not by cinematic nostalgia, but by the sheer force of nature. The mountain strips away illusions. The path to its summit is not a red carpet of pop culture pilgrimage. It's a relentless grind through volcanic scree, where every step upward can slide you 2 steps back. The wind howls. The sun blazes. And yet, the reward is not just in reaching the top, but in what the journey reveals about endurance, perspective, and humility before the earth. Despite its fame, there is a growing movement in New Zealand to recognize and honor the spiritual significance of Ngauruhoe. Many Maori leaders have asked visitors to refrain from climbing its slopes out of respect for its tapu status. The New Zealand Department of Conservation now recommends against summiting the mountain, and signage along the crossing encourages hikers to consider the cultural implications of their actions. More and more, travelers are choosing to admire the mountain from below, letting its shape fill their frame, rather than their footprints mark its summit. And perhaps that is the most profound way to experience it. From a distance, Ngauruhoe is not diminished. It is exalted. It holds the eye and the imagination. Whether cloaked in mist or stark against a cloudless sky, it always seems to be watching, timeless, ageless, and unknowable. Its slopes glow red in the morning sun, its base rooted in ancient lava flows, its peak sharp as a blade. It does not need to erupt to remind you it is alive. To walk in its shadow is to walk a line between myth and matter, between the world that is and the stories we tell to make sense of it. Few mountains hold such dual identity, fictional and real, sacred and cinematic, feared and revered. In the end, Mount Ngauruhoe is not just Mount Doom. It is something far more compelling, a living monument to fire and legend, to landscape and story. It is a reminder that the earth still has places that do not conform, that cannot be tamed, that demand not just admiration, but reverence. Rising from the misty embrace of the Scottish Highlands like a monument to solitude and storm, Boarchelletive Moor cuts a silhouette that is both commanding and melancholic. Situated at the entrance to Glen Etive and the vast, moody expanse of Rannoch Moor, this pyramid-shaped peak is one of Scotland's most iconic and photographed mountains, though to simply call it iconic hardly does justice to the emotional gravity it casts upon those who stand before it. In Gaelic, its name means the great herdsman of Etive, and from the moment it emerges from the drifting clouds, it seems less like a mountain and more like a guardian, watchful, ancient, and unmoved by time. At 1,022 meters, 3,353 feet, Bwachel Etive Mor is not particularly high by international standards. Yet the grandeur of this highland sentinel lies not in its numerical measurements, but in its form. From the roadside viewpoint on the A82 near Glencoe, the mountain appears almost impossibly symmetrical, a near-perfect pyramid of dark, rugged stone that rises straight from the flat moor, its flanks etched with gullies and waterfalls, its summit often veiled in weather. It's the kind of mountain that looks like it belongs on a heraldic crest or the page of an epic poem, sculpted by ice and rain and sorrow. The mountain consists of 4 main tops, with Stob Deag, the tallest and most imposing, facing directly onto Rannoch Moor. Its exposed red rock face is a vertical challenge for climbers, a tapestry of crags and ledges carved by millennia of glaciation. The other 3 summits, including Stob Na Dwar and Stob Quar Altruim, stretch southwestward along a ridge that offers one of the finest high-level walks in Scotland. The full traverse of the ridge is not merely a hike, but a rite of passage for those who seek to understand the Highland spirit, a blend of austerity and raw, breathtaking beauty. Walking on Bwachel Etive Mor is to be immersed in a world of mist and stone, where the cries of ravens echo off the cliffs and the wind carries with it the scent of peat and rain. The weather changes by the hour, sometimes by the minute. A moment of sunlight may illuminate a lone stag on a distant ridge before the clouds roll back in, thick and low, erasing the horizon. It is not a mountain that courts comfort or clarity. It demands resilience. It teaches patience. The surrounding landscape, too, adds to the surreal and unreal quality of the place. Rannoch Moor to the east is a vast expanse of bog and lochen, an ancient landscape of spongy earth, scattered rocks, and standing water that reflects the sky like a broken mirror. To the west lies Glen Etive, a long and narrow valley that descends toward Loch Etive, carved by glacier and cloaked in a brooding atmosphere that has inspired generations of poets, painters, and wanderers. It is a glen filled with stories, some whispered, some roared, where the line between legend and memory is thin. And of course, Bwachel Etive Mor is also steeped in the tragic and heroic lore of Scottish history. It stands near the entrance to Glencoe, site of the infamous 1692 massacre, where members of the Clan MacDonald were slaughtered by government forces they had welcomed into their homes. The landscape remembers. Every rock seems to carry a shadow. The wind that moves through the glen seems to sing in a minor key, echoing with the lament of lives lost and loyalties betrayed. For many visitors, even those unaware of the history, there is a sense that the mountain is not just beautiful, it is haunted. Perhaps that is what makes Bwachel Etive Mor so utterly unreal. It is not merely a geological formation, but a vessel of emotion. It evokes not just awe, but melancholy. Not just admiration, but reflection. Its dark slopes catch the last light of day with a kind of reluctant grace, and in winter, when snow caps its summit and ice clings to its ridges, it appears even more dramatic, an alabaster pyramid under a brooding sky, as if sculpted by the ghosts of Scotland's past. For climbers and mountaineers, the mountain presents both technical challenge and reward. The north face of Stob Deag offers numerous climbing routes, including the famed curved ridge, a scramble that turns into a full-blown alpine adventure when dusted with snow or slick with rain. Yet even for those who never leave the valley floor, Bwachel Etive Mor delivers a visual impact that is unforgettable. It is the kind of mountain that stops you in your tracks. That makes you lower your voice. That makes you look, not just with your eyes, but with your whole being. It has also found its way into popular culture. The opening scene of the James Bond film Skyfall was filmed in the valley of Glen Etive, with Bond's Aston Martin parked against the backdrop of the mountain's stern silhouette. Yet even Hollywood could not outshine the authenticity of this place. Bwachel Etive Mor resists dramatization because it already is a drama. Every cloud that curls around its summit, every raven that drifts across its face, every echo off its cliffs plays like a scene from a story older than any script. And then, there are the moments, the rare, fleeting moments, when the sky opens, and sunlight spills across the moor, casting golden hues on the heather, turning the streams to silver, and painting the mountain in layers of color and shadow. In those moments, the line between the real and the unreal dissolves. The mountain ceases to be merely a place and becomes an experience, intimate, transcendent, unforgettable. In the end, Bwachel Etiv Mor does not ask to be conquered. It does not require flag planting or victory photos. It asks only to be seen, to be witnessed in its full, solemn majesty. And in return, it offers something few places can, a glimpse into the sublime, where the landscape does not just exist, it speaks. There are mountains that command attention through brute size, others through perfect symmetry, and still others through a sense of quiet enigma. Ushba, deep in the Caucasus range of Georgia, belongs to this final, rare category. Twin-spide, frequently cloaked in swirling mist and storm, Ushba is not the tallest peak in the Caucasus. That title belongs to Mount Elbrus, but few, if any, rival it in mystique. To see Ushba rising above the ancient highland village of Mestia is to behold something almost mythological. It doesn't just puncture the sky, it seems to inhabit another reality altogether. Located in the Svaneti region of northwestern Georgia, Ushba rises to 4,710 meters, 15,453 feet, its dual summits like the horns of some slumbering giant. The north summit lies fully in Georgian territory, while the south summit straddles the contentious borderlands that have seen centuries of shifting lines and fierce cultural independence. Its shape is unmistakable, steep, rugged, and angular, its flanks carved by glacier and sheathed in sheer walls that have defied climbers for decades. It is often compared to the Matterhorn, but that comparison feels shallow. Ushba is not merely picturesque, it is elemental. What makes Ushba so unreal is not simply its form, but its behavior. The mountain is notorious for fast-changing, violent weather. Even on days of clear blue sky, a swirl of clouds can build around its peaks within minutes, wrapping it in a gauze of mystery. Lightning storms materialize from nowhere. Winds howl through the gorges. Snowfall can begin and end within the same hour. Local mountaineers call Ushba the Queen of the Caucasus, and like any queen of legend, she is beautiful, mercurial, and merciless. For centuries, Ushba has dominated the folklore of Svaneti, a region that already feels removed from the modern world. The Svan people, speakers of a unique and ancient language, have lived in these highlands for generations, preserving customs, architecture, and stories that elsewhere have long faded into history. Their stone defense towers, chiseled from the very rock of the mountains, dot the villages like chess pieces from another age. These towers, some over 1,000 years old, once served to protect families from both avalanches and invaders, often both at once. From their narrow windows, generations have watched the profile of Ushba change with the seasons, sometimes clear and gleaming with sunlight, sometimes a formless phantom behind blizzards and storm. Among the local legends, Ushba is sometimes described as cursed, a mountain that consumes those who attempt to conquer her. These are not empty stories. The climbing history of Ushba is grim. The south summit was first reached in 1903 by a German expedition, and the north summit in 1937 by Soviet climbers. Since then, it has become one of the most technically difficult and dangerous peaks in the Caucasus. The routes are long, exposed, and vulnerable to rockfall and avalanches. Many climbers have perished on its slopes, their bodies claimed by the very ice they sought to overcome. Ushba does not forgive mistakes. It punishes arrogance. It is not a mountain to be bagged, it is a mountain to be humbled by. And yet, despite the danger, Ushba continues to lure adventurers, photographers, and seekers of beauty. From the meadows of Mazeri or the high trails above Mestia, the view of Ushba is hypnotic. In the golden light of dawn, its peaks glow like polished bronze. In the blue shadow of dusk, they seem to vanish into the sky itself. The glacier-fed rivers that race down from its flanks cut through forests of pine and beech, and high above, the alpine meadows explode with wildflowers in summer, edelweiss, gentian, and the rare Svan daisy, creating a contrast of color and shadow that feels almost painted. In the midst of this untamed grandeur lies a spiritual resonance that words struggle to capture. Ushba is not simply part of the landscape, it is the soul of it. Travelers often describe the feeling of being watched when in its presence, not in a paranoid sense, but with a certain reverence, as if the mountain is aware of your presence, quietly measuring your intentions. Even standing miles away, you can feel it, the silent authority it holds over everything that surrounds it. In recent years, Svaneti has opened more to tourism, with trekkers from around the world discovering its trails, villages, and dramatic scenery. Yet even as hotels appear and hiking maps circulate, Ushba remains untamed. Its upper slopes are unreachable to all but the most skilled alpinists, and even they speak of it with awe and caution. Unlike many other famous peaks, Ushba offers no casual access, no cable cars, no well-worn switchbacks. It remains what it has always been, remote, wild, and indifferent to our presence. That indifference is perhaps what makes Ushba feel so unreal. In a world increasingly mapped, charted, photographed, and geotagged, here is a place that continues to resist categorization. It does not perform for cameras. It does not yield to weather forecasts or satellite imagery. It can be stunningly clear one moment, then vanish entirely behind curtains of cloud. Even those who live under its shadow every day speak of it with the respect one gives a living, breathing entity. And maybe that's the truth of it. Ushba is not a place. It is a presence. To stand before Ushba is to sense time stretching far beyond human history, to feel the pulse of the earth beneath your boots, to witness something so profoundly vast, so unknowably complex, that you are momentarily released from the illusion of control. You don't conquer Ushba, you glimpse it. And even that is enough to leave a mark on the soul. In the end, Ushba is not a destination. It is a revelation. A jagged truth that pierces the sky and stands, as it always has, between the known and the unknowable. Between what we can reach and what we can only revere. Among the shifting mists and rain-drenched glens of the Scottish Highlands, where stories of ancient warriors and weathered clans still echo in the crags, stands Ben Nevis, tall, stoic, and enduring. Known affectionately as the Ben, this mountain rises to 1,345 meters, 4,413 feet, making it the highest point in the British Isles. But its significance goes far beyond mere elevation. Ben Nevis is a landmark that has borne witness to centuries of history, shaped by glacial fury, softened by time, and revered by all who have walked the lonely trails of the Highlands. Unlike the perfect pyramidal peaks found elsewhere in the world, Ben Nevis has a rugged, time-worn profile, a broad, hulking mass rather than a sharp spike. Its summit, often shrouded in thick fog, resembles a collapsed volcano crater, its edges crumbling and broken, its rocks dark and bruised by age. This is no accident of erosion. Ben Nevis is in fact the remnant of an ancient volcano that erupted violently hundreds of millions of years ago, its core now exposed and slowly weathering into the mountain we see today. That prehistoric fire may be gone, but what remains is a monument to the Earth's raw, chaotic creativity, a peak carved not for show, but by elemental force. From the town of Fort William at its base, Ben Nevis doesn't always reveal itself easily. Clouds cling to it like a habit, often obscuring the summit for days at a time. Locals joke that visitors are more likely to see the mountain on postcards than in person. Yet when the skies clear, even briefly, its silhouette dominates the skyline, rising above Loch Lynn and the surrounding moorland with silent gravity. It is not just a mountain. It is the embodiment of the Highland spirit, proud, remote, and a little melancholic. The most popular route to the summit is the mountain track, often called the tourist path, which snakes its way up the western flank in long, steady switchbacks. Though accessible to many with reasonable fitness, the climb is no mere stroll. The weather can shift with sudden violence. Rain lashes without warning. Temperatures can drop below freezing even in summer, and visibility at the summit can vanish in seconds, turning a well-marked path into a confusing maze of scree and fog. Every year, hikers underestimate its challenge. Some are rescued. A few, tragically, do not return. The Ben, like many mountains, is patient, but never forgiving. As one ascends, the landscape transforms from lush heather and grass into a moonscape of rock and lichen. In spring and early summer, alpine flowers bloom in quiet defiance of the harsh conditions. Birds of prey soar high overhead, riding the thermal winds that twist and dance through the glens. Red deer, elusive and elegant, may appear in the distance, their antlers silhouetted against the ridgelines. Everything here feels a little more ancient, a little more raw. The summit plateau, when reached, feels like the roof of a lost world. Often wrapped in thick cloud, it appears suddenly, a broad field of stone and cairns, with no fanfare and little shelter. There, amidst the rubble of broken boulders, stands the ruins of an old observatory, a lonely outpost that operated from 1883 to 1904. Built by scientists determined to study the weather in this most unforgiving of locations, the observatory was manned year-round, its staff living in isolation and recording conditions in the face of storms, ice, and silence. The building still stands in part, its stones wind-scarred and moss-covered, a reminder that human curiosity has long sought to understand this remote perch, and that the mountain will outlast every attempt. On clear days, the view from the summit is staggering. To the east, the Grampian Mountains roll into the haze, endless waves of stone and mist. To the west, the Atlantic glimmers in distant flashes between breaks in the cloud. You can see Skye, the Outer Hebrides, even Ireland on the rarest of days. But more than the view, what strikes the soul is the quiet. A stillness so complete that it magnifies every sound, the crunch of boots on gravel, the wind catching the edge of your hood, your own breath mingling with the thin air. And yet, Ben Nevis is not all about solitude. It is a mountain woven deeply into Scotland's national consciousness. It has been the site of charity climbs, musical performances, scientific expeditions, and even quirky challenges, like hauling pianos or bathtubs to the top. Its slopes have been walked by generations of Highlanders, explorers, poets, and pilgrims. Its Gaelic name, Ben Nevis, has multiple interpretations. Some say it means mountain with its head in the clouds, others venomous mountain. Both names suit it well. It is aloof, mysterious, and occasionally wrathful. And it is loved all the more for it. In winter, the mountain takes on a different face entirely. Ice coats the cliffs of the North Face, one of the most dramatic climbing venues in the UK. Here, technical ascents are undertaken with crampons, ice axes, and nerves of steel. The corries fill with snow, cornices loom overhead, and avalanche risk becomes very real. This is not the tourist's Ben Nevis. It is the mountain in full, unrelenting character, a proving ground for those who seek the sharp edge of wilderness. For all its exposure, Ben Nevis remains surprisingly humble. It does not tower above the highlands like some remote deity. It sits within them, part of the great flowing tapestry of land and sky. What makes it unreal is not that it seems alien or unreachable, but that it feels so much a part of something timeless. You don't stand on Ben Nevis and feel superior. You feel small, in the best way possible. The mountain doesn't elevate you, it grounds you. There's something else, too. Something less tangible, harder to describe. A presence. A weight in the air. Perhaps it is the accumulated memory of those who have stood here before. The soldiers training in the world wars, the locals walking to escape, the lovers scattering ashes, the dreamers watching the horizon. Or perhaps it's simply that Ben Nevis, for all its physical reality, carries with it a story. A slow, geological poem told in stone and mist, rain and silence. In the end, Ben Nevis is not simply a high point. It is a heart point. A place where the land opens itself not with extravagance, but with quiet dignity. Where grandeur is not found in drama, but in endurance. It is a mountain that asks little and gives much, a lesson in patience, in humility, and in the quiet strength of standing firm through every storm. This video is for educational or entertainment purposes only, and information provided in the video may be incorrect. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing to the channel and like the video.